Everybody, Uneducated Economist here. So in this video, we are going to be talking about how they are going to continue to be pushing the inflation expectation into the future. They want pain and misery upon the people. They need them to be suffering in pain and misery in order for them to acquire the monetary policy in order to conduct themselves going into the future. But they need an elevated inflation expectation. It doesn't really matter what happens with inflation. I mean, it does. Right? Inflation is a big deal, but it's more about your expectations about the future. That's the most important part. Now, what I find very interesting is over the last few months, we have had nothing but threats of tariffs and possible tariffs, and nobody knows what's going on. Keep pushing the uncertainty, and the chaos is now ripping through the economy. And what did we find come out with the CPI? The Consumer Price Index? It's actually coming down. Like the inflationary scenario that should be elevated and pushing ever higher is actually coming down some, much to the surprise of just about everybody, considering that if you go and Google any federal official over the last 2 weeks, you would find it very difficult to find a Fed official. These are the people who are in charge of monetary policy, talking about anything other than an elevated inflation expectation. The threats of tariff pushing inflation ever higher is the concern coming from the Federal Reserve. We may need to leave interest rates elevated because of the inflation scare that is coming. All the possible ideas of inflationary pressures coming from tariffs and global supply chain breakdowns and everything that's happening from the credible threat of that should elevate the inflation expectation, which it did, but the reality of the situation is much different. This is a problem. This is a problem, not for us. Like, we want to see inflation come down. That's our paycheck going further. That's our dollar being able to purchase more. We want to see inflation come down. As an average working day stiff like I am, I feel the pain of inflation just like everybody else does out there. However, when it comes to conducting monetary policy, an elevated inflation expectation is absolutely needed. And they have the communication for an elevated inflation expectation. But the reality of the situation is much different in that we see that CPI coming down. Will that be the case going into the future? Well, maybe, maybe not. We'll have to wait and see. But if you were to ask just about any economist or any Fed official or anybody out there last week if we are going to find elevated inflation going into the future, it would have been very difficult to find anybody who would have said anything other than yes. But here we are, we're seeing it actually move the other way. Now, when I think about how it is that the Federal Reserve had communicated many times that they essentially want the people suffering in pain and misery in order for monetary policy to have regained its power, they literally need people to be suffering. And I know that's hard to believe, but it's coming directly from Jerome Powell's own mouth, August 27th of 2020, when he gave a speech saying that he knows that the low-income households, the ones who have suffered with job loss and just that low income, they suffer the most when we have inflationary pressures. However, monetary policy at the lower bound of zero, due to the fact that they had a low inflation expectation, was going to be a problem going into the future. And in order to solve that problem, they needed an elevated inflation expectation and needed elevated inflation. And so here we see inflation expectation much elevated, but the actuality of it is coming down. And I believe that the Federal Reserve is going to be very concerned about that situation. I mean, think about it. Every single Fed official was coming out last week and the week before talking about how there's going to be inflation coming into the future, how they have to keep the interest rates elevated because of the inflation that is coming to the future. And then what do we see with the CPI? Quite the opposite, much to a lot of people's surprise. I mean, even mine, I didn't know where it was going to go, and I didn't have much expectations of it. But to see it actually drop, considering how much threats of tariffs, ideas of what tariffs is going to do to the price of everything, that should have elevated inflation, but it didn't do it. It didn't create a higher price in the CPI. It actually got lowered. And so when we start thinking about how it is that the credible threat theory plays into a lot of the stuff that we are seeing out there, this starts to make a lot of sense. The Federal Reserve hasn't had an issue for the last 20 years. You know what their major concern was? Deflation. Not inflation. Inflation wasn't their problem. In fact, they were looking for inflation come 2018, just scared as hell. Like, where the hell was it? Why didn't it show up? Right? This was a major concern of them. They just went through quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, and 4, talking 2018. They took a balance sheet of $850 billion to $4.5 trillion, and they couldn't find the inflation. They were like, where is it? Like, all this money printing didn't do it. Right? And this was a major problem for the Fed. Knowing that that was a huge issue and that they needed to solve that problem of a too low of an inflation expectation that was interfering with monetary policy. It was interfering with monetary policy because what that did is it pushed interest rates very close to zero. This was so worrisome for the Federal Reserve that they had to, at any cost, right, figure out a way to create the inflation expectation to be elevated. Now, whether or not it was going to come directly from the Federal Reserve itself, or if it was going to come from economic chaos created by an administration, regardless of how it took place, that's what they were looking for. And they got it. Now, is it working for them? Not very well. They were hoping, trying, pushing, doing everything they could to elevate the inflation expectation over the last few weeks and months, and it didn't really work. CPI is coming down. I can only assume that as we go into the future, you're going to find ever-increasing amounts of inflation expectation being pushed. In fact, I'm already seeing where this 90-day pause on tariffs can get extended. Like, they're already talking about extending the 90-day pause. Like, is this, I mean, you can't even really make this stuff up. There is no certainty coming to the market. There is absolute uncertainty. They want to make sure that it's uncertain. They had one of the greatest rallies in the Dow history yesterday, only to come back today and finding that it's dramatically falling again. How certain are people going to be within this economy when you have such dramatic, violent swings within the markets? When you have such dramatic, violent swings within the expectations of what's coming to the idea of tariffs and international trade? There is absolute no certainty within this economy. And then I think about it, I was like, what actually has happened? Like, what have they actually done now? I understand that there's some big issues happening with China, but all the threats of tariffs, 100% tariffs, tariffs on day one, tariffs on April 9th, tariffs coming in 90 days. Here's a big list of tariffs that everybody's going to get. Never mind, it's actually going to be 10% tariffs. Where's the certainty? None. Absolute none. That's what they are trying to do, create the uncertainty. If they can create uncertainty, then they are create an elevated inflation expectation by simply having the people convinced that there is going to be chaos and problems and retaliation and war. Right? Keep pushing that out there, and you will find that the fear, uncertainty, and doubt will then create a situation of uncertainty that then can be used against the people. Like, if you keep people in fear, if you keep them uncertain and you keep them in doubt, that is the exact energy of you that they need to be in order to be controlled. And every single day it comes out, it's just more reiteration into that. There's no surprise going on here. This isn't surprising to me at all. Like, I kept saying, what tariffs? What tariffs? People, even today, when I say that, I say, what tariffs is it that you're talking about? They're like, oh, all these tariffs on China. And I'm like, yeah, okay, let's set China aside. What other tariffs are you talking about? You know, there was a tariff on lumber back in August. Didn't cause lumber prices to rise. I mean, here we are at $570 per thousand. The idea that there was going to be some major issues coming, right? 25% tariff to lumber started jacking up the speculation into lumber, only to find that there is going to be no lumber tariffs, right? No, that's that. Go and look at the articles. Just 5 days ago, there was talk about how the lumber tariffs have been exempted. There is no lumber tariff, only to have on Saturday a 34% countervailing tariff put on lumber. What is it? Is there going to be a 25% lumber tariff or not? Is there going to be a countervailing anti-dumping tariff put on lumber? Yeah. Does it cause the prices to rise? Doesn't appear to. All this expectation, fear, and uncertainty and doubt that was put into lumber all for the last month, talking about how there was going to be lumber tariffs, people asking me what it's going to do to the cost of a house to build a house, all these people sending me articles saying it's going to cause the price of a house to go up $10,000 to build, and I'm thinking these people are absolutely delusional. Not only is it not going to increase the cost of building a house, right? It's certainly not going to do it by $10,000. The reality is it's probably going to be closer to like $3,000, and you can adjust the cost of building a house by $3,000 just simply by changing the flooring and cabinets you put in it. This whole idea of lumber tariffs creating all this chaos within the housing market was completely fabricated out of pure imagination. And it works. I mean, it totally works. The people were freaked out about it. I had all kinds of people coming up to me at the desk at the lumber yard that I work at. What are we going to do with about lumber? What's about lumber? Should I buy lumber now? What about lumber? And I'm like, chill out. Let's wait and see if there's even a lumber tariff, right? Just calm down for just a minute. People backing off on their bids, backing off on their projects, backing off on all this stuff, thinking that there's going to be this huge price of lumber increase because of these tariffs. All of a sudden, the tariffs are removed. People do not even come to me and say, dude, what about the anti-dumping countervailing tariffs that were put on over the weekend? Not a single person has come to me and asked me about that. You know that? Not a single person, not one, nobody knows. It's not being broadcasted out there in the mainstream media. Go and Google it for yourself. You'll find like a Bloomberg article, you might find a CNN article, and you'll find a few Canadian publications talking about it. But other than that, it's like crickets out there. But the credible threat of a tariff coming, oh, that was blasted all over the news. All kinds of theory, all kinds of economists talking about it. Complete pure imagination, artistic fantasies. That's what it was. There was no reality based in that. None. Complete rumors, stories made up, people imagining like how much it's going to cost to build into, like none of that stuff was real. It was all fakery. But yet it profoundly impacted people's lives. Literally making decisions not to do bids, not to go forward with projects because they were so worried about what lumber tariffs were going to do. Now that that has been alleviated, there's no more lumber tariffs on there, we get this countervailing in, and not a single whisper from anybody, not even the people I work with. Like, I had to show my boss. He was like, no, they exempted lumber from tariffs. I'm like, no, bro, look, right here, the countervailing, the ones that they had essentially put into motion months ago that people like Keta from Madison's Lumber Reporter was actually reporting on weeks ago. This wasn't new, it wasn't hidden, but it certainly was not broadcasted. I mean, they could have been broadcasting this information along with the credible threat of 25% lumber tariffs. There could have been dual information being broadcasted out there, but they didn't produce the truth. No. We got to hide that. Don't tell anybody about that. If they want to know, they can go and research it for themselves. Instead, let's blast the public with a bunch of rumors. Right? I mean, I'm watching it happen in real time. Like, I am literally watching this happen. I kept telling people, don't worry about the lumber tariffs. If there's going to be one, let's wait and see what actually happens. All these people made these decisions to back out on their lumber purchases, back out on their projects, only to find that it was exempted. But then here we have an actual tariff that is implemented on lumber, and nobody knows. Like, it's a major, it was 34% countervailing tariff. Literally nobody's come to me and asked me about that. All right. Like, you know, I mean, if you want to be guided by the fear and uncertainty and doubt that the mainstream media is broadcasting out there, go for it, because it's obviously working. It's obviously working for them. And I keep trying to tell people to stop following that stuff, right? You can't follow it because it's pure propaganda. Every single bit of it. There is nothing that comes out on the mainstream media that has, I mean, there's truth, there's facts, right? It's in there, it's mixed in. But the belief and the meaning that they give but behind that information creates a fear and uncertainty within the people that they are now being guided with. And you can see it. It's just like, I mean, that's perfect evidence of it is within the lumber market right now. I mean, like soon as that lumber tariff exemption was put out there on the news, lumber futures dropped dramatically. Like, I mean, it went from like 670 per thousand down to under 600. It was like down at 570 at one point. Like, I think they're at 580 right now or something. This is this this is a very normal price. Like, very normal. I mean, back in 2017, 18, lumber prices were up around, holy moly. Holy moly. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Okay, I just got a huge super chat. Oh my gosh. Man, I just forgot what I was talking about. Let's go read this comment. Oh my gosh, $289 from the uneducated communist. Wow. All right, would you be willing to speak the Hazelden? Would you be willing to speak the Hazelden, chairman of the American Communist Party, about your general take on the Federal Reserve and their policy objectives and tactics? He's on Twitter and Telegram. I think a conversation between the two of you would be interesting and productive. Wow. Like, to speak at the American Communist Party. You guys aren't gonna like hang me up or something, are you? Like, I don't know if you're really gonna approve of my belief system at the Communist Party. Like, I'm kind of against that. So I really appreciate the super chat and all the money for it. If this is if this is an informative thing and not one to be like, I'm gonna, basically corner you once you get there kind of thing, I would do it. Like, I would speak at any event. Like, I don't care what it is, and I'll share my information. And if I'm sharing it to the Communist Party in order to get them to think in a more libertarian fashion, I would do it. Like, I'm libertarian, right? I'm like exactly the opposite of government rule. In fact, I think government getting out of our lives is better. I'm closer to anarchy than anything else out there. The only reason why I say I'm a libertarian is because I would like to think of myself as a libertarian. If we're going to have any kind of government involvement, that's the sort of like level of involvement that I would appreciate. So to me, like, the Communist Party is something like the opposite, right? But I really appreciated the offer and all that other stuff, and like I said, I would speak at any event. Okay. And I really appreciate the super chat, man. I mean, that is hefty. That is a huge one, man. I don't know, like, it's one of the bigger ones I've seen. Yeah. All right. I will speak to communists for a nominal fee. I'll reach out to you over Telegram. Thank you, man. I appreciate it. The uneducated communists. I love all these uneducated like channels that came up. The uneducated mechanic, the uneducated philosopher, the uneducated, like, I love it. It was so cool to see some of those come up. Capitalism and communism are two sides of the same coin. Yeah, kind of heard that, but I kind of disagree with it too. And to be perfectly honest, the idea behind, like, even the socialist, communist, all these other different things, like, the theories behind them, when you look at like the benefits of some of these things, like, like something of attractive, right? Like, I mean, people are like, man, that sounds great, sounds like a wonderful time. Everybody works, everybody eats. Hey, that's a great thing. I personally like to rise and fall on my own merits, right? I want to know that if my efforts are going to be rewarded if I put out extra effort. If I have a great idea, I want to be able to use that idea to promote myself to the highest levels possible, and I don't want to be restricted, and I don't want to restrict other people from that possibility either, because if I restrict other people, I literally restrict the opportunities for myself. Now, if I didn't want those opportunities, I'd be totally down for restricting somebody else, right? And so this is where I think, like, my personal conflicts with the way that a lot of like that structure happens in which that they limit and take control and stuff like that. Like, I don't want to be limited, and I don't want to feel like I'm being controlled. That's one of the reasons why I like the whole idea of anarchy. And it's because it doesn't have government involvement at all, and we are there to rule ourselves as men. How long have I been out here? I only have a few more minutes. Oh crap, I gotta go. Alright. At least the communists want to hear different perspective, which is good. Well, okay, I think I'm not going to agree or disagree with this, but from what I can gather from the Communist Party, if you rise up in contrast to, like, if you contradict them, it's like it's you are considered like an enemy of the state, right? And that's the concern that I believe that most people would have living in a communist country, is that if you're cool with it, hey, that's awesome. But if you're not cool with it, you're going to get stomped out. And there's plenty of evidence of that happening throughout history. So again, like, you know, I like to be able to use my freedom of speech and think that to myself that if I say the wrong thing, I'm not going to get put in jail for it. Right? Like, I mean, that's, you know, and so that gives me the ability to come out here and feel very confident in being able to express and say whatever it is that I want, knowing that I live in a country in which that I'm not going to worry about bad-mouthing Donald Trump or Biden or anybody else and then be put in jail for it or shut down or, you know, whatever comes from it. But yeah, I'll speak anywhere, anytime. All right. Yes, you basically pay as you go. There is nothing you can't criticize here in the U.S. Man, that was an amazing super chat. I can't believe it. Anarchy is less, no rules, like most think. They're more about natural incentives as personal governance. I will not suffer. Stop spreading fear. Nobody's spreading any fear, man. I put fearful, scary titles out there in order to attract the views, right? Because when I put scary titles and scary thumbnails, the viewership on the channel goes up 5 times, right? If I put descriptive titles out there, nobody watches them. They're too boring, right? They need to be triggered in order to click on that video. Once they click on it, if I don't have caught their attention in the first literal 10 seconds of the video, then I'm going to lose their attention. If I don't have the grasp within the 30 seconds, like got them locked in, it'll all be over within a minute. That's literally how you have to do this. You have to grab their attention with the thumbnail and title, and then you have to have them hooked in the first 10 seconds, or 3 seconds really. You have about 3 seconds to hook them. Right? And if you don't have their attention grabbed onto, and if you don't have a hold of their attention within the 30 seconds, like, you know, you got them, like, okay, telling them what it is that they're about ready to see, it's almost impossible. Right? It's not easy. It's not easy putting out, like, I just love to come out here and just fire up the camera and just start talking without having to do anything else. That would be like my ultimate. But to think of like a scary title that's not one that I've repeated, that's somewhat related to what it is I'm about ready to talk about, and I have to spend, you know, an hour thinking about like how would I just use the right word so it isn't too long but good and triggering, like, this is not what I want to do. That's not what I want to do. Like, I don't want to try and think of the scariest title I can possibly think of in order to get views. I want to put out awesome content. That's it. That is the only thing I want to do. All right? I mean, I don't want to spend time editing. I don't want to spend time, you know, creating fancy thumbnails. I don't want to spend time doing any of that stuff. All that is superficial, right? The content, what I am saying, this is the only thing that really matters. Not even the video itself. Like, the visual is not important. It's literally just the audio, and that's it. Everything else is really just a secondary, or even not even important at all. So I'm not spreading fear. I'm just getting attention. All right. The things that I say are very real. It's very straightforward. It's very useful in my opinion, right? And I'm not out here just spreading a bunch of garbage in my opinion. Right? I spread out information and show you how it is that they are doing these things so that you can have the best position to benefit yourself. You know, that's what I do. That's my intentions, you know. But I also like to make money, and I also like to have views on the channel. You know, my goal, like a longest time, was just to simply get 10,000 views on a video. Like, that was it. If I could get the video up to 10,000, I feel like I did something right. Well, when you put out videos for months and months and months and they never get to 10,000 because you're very descriptive, very cool, very calm with everything that you're doing, it doesn't trigger anybody and nobody wants to view it. But if you talk about how the stock market is going to crash and everybody's going to die, woo, man, talk about pouring in the views and making money. Right? I get the ad revenue. Right? I'm just trying to explain it. I feel that when I put out videos, I'm putting out really good content that you can use. I'm not out here just trying to scare the hell out of you. But I got 30 seconds to do that, right? I got 30 seconds to try and scare the hell out of you, scare the hell out of you with the titles, scare the hell out of you with the thumbnails. And then once you're nice and triggered and emotional, then you come on into the video and then I give you some good information. How else is it going to get done? All right. Don't you know that I was, come on, man. We're going to die. I don't know that. Okay, listen, you know I was being facetious, right? How does increasing inflation expectation benefit the economy? It doesn't okay, people hear that differently. I said it benefits monetary policy. There's a difference. Your economy and my economy are different. How does it benefit my economy and your economy? That's up to you and your understanding of your position and what you need to do with it. But it helps monetary policy because monetary policy was operating at the lower bound of zero, which meant that no adjustment of monetary policy was going to work. They couldn't get past zero. That's it. They hit the lower bound of zero and that's it. No downward adjustment can be had. However, they needed to continue to operate monetary policy in some fashion. And this is where they learn to use jawboning, forward guidance. They're literally their words. And, you know, things like quantitative easing to put this image out there that the money printer is going off. And so people have this elevated inflation expectation from the money printer. When you have an elevated inflation expectation, it'll raise the inflation rate, which in turn will eventually force the Federal Reserve to try and combat that by raising the Fed funds rate. This is how they were able to get the Fed funds rate off the lower bound to zero. Now, however, in order to stimulate the economy, they have to be able to drop below something called the neutral interest rate. The neutral interest rate is the rate that's neither accommodating nor restricting the economy. It's when the Federal Reserve is neutral. Now, this neutral interest rate cannot be observed in real time. It's constantly moving, and generally over the last 25 years or so, it had been ticking down with the inflation expectation going down. So when the Fed funds rate had hit zero, neutral interest rate was very close to zero as well. So even when the Federal Reserve was able to raise the Fed funds rate up to that 5.5%, it still wasn't going to be in a stimulating effect to drop the Fed funds rate because they would still be hitting the lower bound of zero where neutral was residing. Right? So got to get below the neutral in order to stimulate the economy. So now in order to get the neutral interest rate to be elevated, you have to raise the inflation expectation. Fed funds rates is up. They have that at an elevated position trying to combat the inflationary scenario. You keep pushing inflation expectations out there and you will raise the neutral interest rate. The further that you raise the neutral interest rate, the higher it goes, the more room the Federal Reserve will have to drop below the neutral rate in order to stimulate the economy before hitting the lower bound of zero. This is why they have to have an elevated inflation expectation, is to literally raise the neutral interest rate up so that they can drop far enough below neutral before hitting the lower bound to actually stimulate the economy. If they do not do this, then there is no other monetary policy tool other than their words. That's the only tool that they will have if they do not raise the neutral interest rate by having an elevated inflation expectation. 90 days until the tariffs kick in, or maybe longer, but as long as we keep the elevated inflation expectation going for the next few months, it ought to pull the neutral rate ever higher. Will it happen? Time will tell. Uneducated Economist. You guys let me know. Thank you so much for that super chat. I got another one here. I'm just going to go read it real quick because I got to go. Tyrant Tommy, thank you so much for the $10. Money Energy made another killing today, this time shorting stocks impacted by China tariffs. Turns out there are public traded companies that have almost 100% reliance on goods from China. Whoops. Wow, it's just incredible. All right, we got another one here from the Uneducated Economist. Thank you so much for the $5.10, man, on top of everything you already did. Thank you, man. I appreciate it. I posted some details to the UE discussion telegram. Okay, I'll go and take a look at that, man. Thank you so much. You know, I cannot thank you for that. That is an incredible super chat to send for the channel, and I can't thank you enough for it, man. It's amazing. All right, libertarian ideology only works in small homogenous groups. Large civs need strict rules to survive long term. I believe that's your opinion. I think that's your opinion, and I do think that probably from history, but I think technology and the way that we can use things like blockchain technology with smart contracts and literally just make government irrelevant. Like, we're going to have some form of government out there. I get that, right? There needs to be a police officer you can call. Okay, I got that part, right? I believe in that. I mean, there is some form of it that can take place. But to think that we can literally write contracts, smart contracts, do in cryptocurrencies that literally have nothing to do with our government. I love that idea. Like, make them irrelevant. You know, fine, go ahead, make all your rules, make all your government. We're going to do things over here that literally exclude you out of our life, and you're not important to me anymore. That's the type of behavior that I would like to go down. That's the libertarian mindset that I would like people to see. Now, again, that's just for me. Other people may not like that. We got communist parties out there who believe in something very different than me. Like, am I the one who is saying what's right or wrong? Absolutely not. I can't tell people what is right or wrong. I can only think of what I feel is right or wrong for me. Okay, I gotta go.